Hi, this is ADHD Unmasked. This is the second of 3 lives that I'm doing for ADHD Awareness Month. And in this live, I'm going to be talking about diagnosis of ADHD and also some of the conditions that commonly go hand in hand with it or are sometimes diagnosed instead of it. So first of all, who am I? I'm AJ Harman. I'm the founder of the Explorations Outside the Box Facebook community. And I'm a neurodivergent coach in both senses of the word. And I'm also a writer and an editor. I was diagnosed with ADHD myself in 2020. Also in conjunction with autism. So let's talk about diagnosis, or rather underdiagnosis, especially in the UK. So we're lagging behind quite a lot of countries, and mainly the US. Actually, the US are much further ahead with this in recognising and researching ADHD and how it presents in different people. So they have kind of higher diagnosis rates over there. But in the UK, we're looking at there still being this kind of idea amongst the medical professionals that ADHD is presents in males much more than females. So sorry, it occurs in males much more than it does in females, and it's still kind of published that the ratio tends to be 4:1, and across the world there's actually different ratios that are presented. So it can range, in different countries, it ranges from 3:1 to 16:1. So, that's for every 3 males or every 16 males, depending on where you are, there'll be 1 female. So, but when it comes to adults being diagnosed, it's starting to be recognised now that the ratio is actually more 1:1. And so we know that it's a lifelong condition. There is, I'll talk in a little bit about a kind of potentially a sort of adult onset ADHD, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the lifelong condition of ADHD that you're born with, that may become more obvious as you get older, but basically has always been there. So if adults are starting to be recognised that there's more or less an even distribution of males and females, then it goes to show that just how many girls are being underdiagnosed. And that's a really serious problem, because the kind of things that girls battle with as they're growing up. And by the way, I'm saying girls, but that's mainly because in girls you have this kind of internal presentation, which I described in my live last week, where it isn't always picked up externally. People don't realise. And the trouble is that all of the kind of things that girls or boys who have an internal kind of presentation, or non-binary people who have this kind of internal presentation, they are really struggling with these things and not getting the help and the support, and also they don't understand themselves why they're struggling. And as you get older, so many people feel like they're failing at life. Their self-esteem really goes down, and it can lead to all kinds of mental health conditions, because ADHD itself is not a mental health condition, it's a neurodevelopmental condition. But it does lead, in a lot of cases, to things like anxiety and depression. And so, the kind of internal stress that's going on and leading to these things can also lead to all sorts of other problems, like eating disorders, for instance, and substance misuse, all kinds of post-traumatic stress, and unplanned or teen pregnancies are really common as well. So, and a lot of that is in girls. In boys or in girls with more of an external presentation, quite often it will lead to criminal activity and things like that. There's a higher proportion of people in prisons that have ADHD, and partly this is because they're not being picked up early enough and given the support they need with their challenges. So it is a really big problem. And one of the things I wanted to look at is why there is this gender bias against picking it up in girls, and I think there are a few things to do with that. One is, as we know, most of the research and the assessment criteria and things like that have been written based on the work that's been done on boys. And so there is, there still is, I think, amongst the clinicians and the professionals who are assessing and diagnosing, there's still a bit of a bias towards this, the external presentation, the more stereotypical traits. They're picked up much more readily. In classrooms, the teachers don't pick it up as readily, because the ones that, the children that stand out as needing some kind of either support or discipline or, just looking at in the first place are people who are disrupting the class or causing them a problem. And if you're a girl and you're sitting at the back and you're just being very quiet and you're not really paying attention, you're not disrupting things, so you're much less likely to be picked up. And then and similarly at home as well. So quite often parents, we're not, and I say we because I was exactly the same. I've got, my children both have ADHD. And I knew nothing about it. The only things I knew about it were very, very stereotypical things. So it wasn't something I was looking out for or expecting or, seeing as ADHD. And a lot of parents are like that, which is why I want to raise more awareness about this so that parents are aware as well and may look at their children and how they might be presenting in a different way and how they may really be struggling, even though it doesn't necessarily appear that way on the surface. And then finally as well, I think girls in particular, but again, it may be some boys and non-binary children are really conditioned from an early age to fit in much more, to be seen and not heard, and to be polite and to do as they're told. And so that conditioning really takes over, it really leads to masking, and most of the time not necessarily aware, really conscious of this masking. It's not something that you kind of choose to do. But girls tend to do it much more. They're much more socially conditioned, and so again they're masking a lot of their struggles. And when you get older as well, there's so much shame around not being able to handle everything that other women seem to be able to do. Either managing their work-life balance, once they have children, you know, looking after children, maybe trying to work at the same time, or being, you know, being at home just all the time with the children, and really struggling with these things. And there's a lot of shame around that. So a lot of women don't speak up about it. So again, you know, I think there's just a really big drive for us to mask a lot. And so that's why I think traditionally there's been this mismatch between how, you know, with this ratio of males to females. In addition to that, ADHD itself, you know, it's generally thought now, the more research that's being done, it's thought that if you look at the population, you find a higher percentage of people with ADHD in the population than you do that are, you know, actually in, you know, being researched or being diagnosed. And, you know, another part of the problem with this is it can be really complex to diagnose because of all the other things that are associated with it. So one problem that has affected me a lot actually is the fact that ADHD and autism often really go hand in hand. They're very highly related, and there are a lot of overlap between the traits that you see, but there's also a lot of conflict. And so in a way, those two conditions sometimes mask each other and kind of mean that you're less likely to be picked up for either. So this is a situation with me. And so, for instance, as a child, I would spend most of my time reading, being indoors, not you know, not being outside, not being very loud and boisterous or hyperactive or anything like that. I love to just sit and read and kind of be on my own a lot of the time. But at the same time, I did have some close friends, and I was also very chatty and wanted to share and get into, you know, deep conversations and share. You know, if I found people that shared my own particular special interests, you know, I'd love to share that and talk to people and things. So I didn't appear kind of very strongly one or the other. I seemed quite outgoing to a certain extent, but also liked my own company and liked to do my own thing. So I wasn't seen, you know, when my parents were asked about it when I was having my assessments, they hadn't really recognised either of the conditions in me because, you know, I didn't have the really strong stereotypical traits of either of them. So that's another difficulty. And it's thought that actually a lot of people do have both. It was only fairly recently that psychiatrists were allowed to, I think it's only since the DSM-5 that psychiatrists have been allowed to diagnose both of those conditions in one person. Before that, if you were assessed for autism and found to be autistic, you weren't assessed for ADHD as well. That's full stop. And same with ADHD, you weren't assessed for autism as well. Now they're allowed to look for both, and ideally that's what ADHD you know, assessors should be doing. They should be aware of both and how they present and how this kind of mixed presentation looks, and I think that will make, you know, the diagnosing much more accurate, and will have a, you know, much more accurate reflection in the population of how many people there are that are actually ADHD and autistic. The other thing is that there are a lot of what they call comorbidities, which just means other conditions that are commonly found in neurodivergent people. So people with ADHD often have things like depression and anxiety. And the trouble is that quite often those things can be diagnosed instead of ADHD. You know, I was diagnosed first with depression, and it's difficult to know really whether, you know, that's because I have depression and I have these neurodivergencies as well, or whether just the fact of going for so many years without my own kind of self-knowledge, self-understanding, support, help, strategies and ways of coping, have led to me having depression. It's quite difficult to unpick all of that. And there are also other conditions like bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder and things like that that are really commonly kind of misdiagnosed instead of ADHD. But at the same time, they can be found in the same person. So again, it really takes a lot of careful assessment. Because with all of these things as well, it's not kind of a test you can just have that will say whether or not you can't have a blood test for ADHD or autism or bipolar or whatever. They are done by, it's kind of like a behaviour led assessment, so it is done by careful observations and questionnaires. There's a lot of questionnaires, a lot of questions that are asked, but it takes a really good psychiatrist or clinician to really dig down deep and find out exactly what's going on. I think that's the main thing. I don't know if anybody let me stop gabbling and have a look. Is that hi Stephanie, hi Nikki? Yeah, Stephanie's saying that for her it was mental health that all her GP ever saw. That's just so common. And Peggy's saying that we're so good at masking. And do you know what? And yes, we are. And it does make it more difficult for us to get the diagnosis, to get the help and support that we need. But at the same time, it is a brilliant coping mechanism. We've probably got as far as we've got without being picked up because we're so good at it. So it's a real double-edged sword. Yes, and Stephanie's saying all behaviour is communication, but being aware of what our kids could be communicating helps us to understand better. Exactly. That's what I'd really like to see is some real education for everybody about all neurodivergence. But especially about ADHD, because there is, just this terrible feeling that it's bad behaviour and it's not, or the parents are being blamed as well. So does anybody have any particular questions to do with diagnosis or assessment? I just mentioned, I think a lot of people in the group are already aware, but I used to get asked, well, I still do all the time, get asked so much about ADHD assessment and how, if you suspect that you might have ADHD, what on earth do you do? What's the first step that you need to take and all that kind of thing. So I wrote a roadmap to diagnosis and treatment for ADHD. It's completely free. Happy to send it to anybody. So if you're watching live or if you watch this on the replay and you didn't know about that and you'd like a copy of it, just pop it in the comments or send me a DM and I'll be happy to send that over to you. Okay, so I think that was all. I'm just checking my notes because as you know, I'm not likely to hold it in my head, especially today. I'm having an absolutely dreadful day, which is all ADHD led because I literally completely overloaded myself. I'm sure a lot of you will resonate with that. It's just been constant all day. Yes, please, Linda. Is that for the ADHD, the roadmap to diagnosis? I'll send that over to you. I'll come back in and I'll check actually afterwards. Although I know the lovely Steph is there, I'm sure that she'll be able to keep an eye for me on who if anybody asks for that, and we'll get that out. So I think then there's just one more thing to kind of to talk about, which is really, really exciting. This is the first time. Oh, Ronnie, okay, yeah, I'll get that over to you as well. Yeah, I'm so excited, but in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to be doing three free masterclasses, a little mini series. So it's going to be on the 24th, 25th, and 26th of October in the evening, starting at 7 o'clock. If you're not able to make that, if you're interested and you're not able to make that at all, there will be recordings available, but I really do need you to sign up. So if you register for it but you're not able to make it live, then you will get the recordings. It won't be in this group, it will be in a separate masterclass group. So do let me know if you're interested in that. And I think the wonderful Steph will be able to put a link to the sign up page. But basically it's to help people. One of the things I really find with my clients, but also myself, I know just how important this is. You know, a key to actually managing ADHD and getting your attention and focus on the right things, and being able to manage the condition and all the various challenges that we have with it, are, you know, that the key to that is getting your energy managed first of all. And it's kind of you know, working out what your needs are to be really well, and using systems to really pace yourself, to understand yourself well enough to be able to kind of plan. And so this masterclass, we're going to start off by looking at what I think are the real foundations of it, which is, you know, that the self-care, how to manage your energy levels, because once you've got those kind of things in place, that's when you can start looking at the things like more effective time management, and you know, regulating your attention and putting your focus on the right things, or working out where you want to go, you know, in your career or in your business, or you know, or just in life in general. A lot of the time we can't think about those sort of things when we're feeling completely exhausted and burnt out all the time, or on this, you know, up and down cycle. So I'm going to do three sessions. They'll be about an hour to an hour and a half long over 3 evenings, and we'll work together to get you in a position to understand what your needs are and what you need to do to get things in place to make sure that you're you know, you're as healthy and well as you can be, to then start, you know, finding your focus with your ADHD. So yeah, and Steph has put the link in the comments there. So if you're interested in that, or if you'd like to have the replays afterwards, just sign up there. There will, as I say, there'll be a separate Facebook group which I welcome you into. And I'm just looking here because Rosie has lots of women, she's put a comment here, lots of women especially are misdiagnosed with depression, anxiety, bipolar personality disorder instead of ADHD, although they can coexist, hopefully improving as awareness of ADHD increases. Yes, absolutely, Rosie. And Rosie, you're right in the kind of firing line, aren't you? Because you're working with women, isn't that right? That you're working with women that have ADHD and perhaps are in perimenopause as well. So you must see a lot of that. And Stephanie's saying totally agree. It's all a matter of awareness. I'm hoping my new GP will be supportive, because my old one forgot to do my ADHD assessment referral. Oh my goodness, that's the last thing you need, isn't it? Wonder if they have ADHD. Stephanie saying it's going to be epic. It is. And Steph is helping me. Steph is supporting me to do all this. So if any of you aren't aware, Steph is my wonderful assistant who I got through Access to Work. So that's my funding because of my ADHD and my autism, that I kind of need help and support to run my business like this, to show up like this. And yeah, so she's my support worker, stroke VA, stroke assistant. Oh, she did your autism referral though. Do you know, in different areas, I think some people are hotter on one than the other, aren't they? There are some places where you can wait for years to get an autism assessment and referral, and then other places where it can be relatively quick. But anyway, I think that is it from me today. I need to go and just collapse somewhere now. Thank you very much for being here. If you watch on the replay, don't forget to put #replay so I know you've been here, and please do put any kind of questions or comments for me, and I will see you next week. So next week hopefully I will be back at the normal time of 1 o'clock. And actually I meant to say, I do apologise for anyone who was hoping to join me live at 1 o'clock. As I say, I've had just an absolutely terrible day in terms, I mean, it's not been terrible. I've done loads and loads of stuff. Oh, there's my alarm. Sorry, just done loads and loads of stuff, which was just kind of one thing after another, and I was just never going to be ready and kind of in the right mind space to do it at 1 o'clock, so I had to put it on till 5. But next week, hopefully we'll be back at 1 o'clock. Got ADHD in the wild, so I'm going to talk about things like medication, different kinds of support, coaching, and a little bit about some famous ADHDers that you might not know about. Low grade carnage. That's a good description of it. Thank you. I'm going to get drunk. I think I might do that as well, actually. Yeah, 6 months for ASD, so autism spectrum disorder, 6 months to get an assessment, and 22 months for ADHD, where Stephanie lives. That's just, it's just mind-boggling, isn't it? Okay, right, I'm gonna call it there, and see you next week. Thanks very much.